That's cool. So you're in your workshop.
Right now I'm at home.
You are?
Everything is next to each other for me. I hate commuting, so I moved near both workplaces, and we have our workshop next to the tannery just because we don't want to carry leather too far. It's just easy, everything's like right next door.
How many days a week are you in the workshop?
5 or 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're basically next to the tannery almost every day.
All the time. I was at the tannery yesterday. I'm there like every day anyways.
Yeah. Cool.
It's hard to stay away from such a awesome. You've been there. It's just an amazing place, It's hard to stay away.
Yeah, it's super cool.
And you're in Seattle?
I am.
Yeah, nice. I love all the bear stuff behind you too.
Yeah, it's I live where I work. My house has been, it's in essence, it's just a large studio. I mean, there's no space separation. It's like there's bike parts everywhere. There's clothing everywhere. And I design and basically wake up with what I like. I'm bombarded with shit. Right. So it's like when I wake up and it's like going fucking running. It's like, and that's at 4 something in the morning, right? Because you're getting pounded from either Europe or Japan. And I'm lighting because I've got this bad habit, or maybe it's a good habit, of I light a bunch of fires. As soon as things slow, it's like I'm like a spastic child, I guess, but it's like when I'm starting to poke things in all these directions from lack of busyness or lack of chaos. And then I wake up and it's like I've woken the bear, let's call it, because it's like all those things have now, sparked a reaction or some fucking bullshit that's happening in generally a really good and fun way. And being international or global in kind of your interaction or your consumer or your market is super fun. I mean, when have we ever been in a time where we're bound or limited geographically, or we're not? Like, that's what I meant more. I mean, it's like we're just not geographically limited.
Right.
Like, I run at chaos, and it's not even like a conscious thing, but it seems to be like looking back after things. I'm always, I guess, attracted to chaos, but in the chaos, all I want to do is calm the chaos. So it's this cycle, right? So you're either provoking chaos or running towards it. That's the most consistent thing in my life is the chaos, and then that fight to resolve the chaos.
I love it.
Yeah, it feels good to dive into a bunch of stuff especially that you're interested in, and then organize it and put it together in a way that you like what it looks like at the end.
It's super funny you said that too, because my shirt says chaos will correct itself in time, which is interesting that you brought that up. I noticed with the chaos, I feel like if I'm not on the brink of failure all the time, that means I'm not trying enough, or not like trying to progress and do something new and different. If it's, I probably similar to you, or just get a little bit bored if I'm just like doing the same thing over and over,
I mean, I have everything from riding a motorcycle or, jumping out of planes or, being on a mountain that is beyond your natural capabilities or beyond what's easy is fucking fun. And you feel a way in which is unmatched in like normalcy. And then you become better, or you're fucking, or the result is fucking terrible, right? It's like when the repercussion is fucking terrible, you seem to kind of come to the game a bit better, right? Or I perform better when that alternative to at least making it through it is fucking terrible.
All right, you ready, Josh? Let's do the show.
Yeah.
All right, we jumped the gun because I'm really excited to talk to Josh here from Black Bear. My name's Phil Callis. I'm here with Nick Horween. This is the Full Grain Podcast. Thanks for coming to be on the show with us, Josh. Why don't you introduce yourself, please, and your brand?
Hi, I'm Josh. The brand in which I spend my days doing or creating or kind of I piggyback on the brand to go chase all the shit I want to do. So that is Black Bear brand.
It is you. So how does it feel to have your jacket on Kevin Costner? I wonder what that feels like.
Oh, it was fun. I mean, part of it, I think what's all behind it before it got there is even more fun, really, because by the time it was on the show, it's the relationship that you had, and even with Janetta, who's the kind of the person that oversees and places these garments on all the different the cast, and and she does that based off reading the entire season, right? And then she starts designing it. I'm sure that's how each one of the departments that go into locational aspect and each one of the parts, but basically she's designing the clothing that will fit the part or fit the character for that part. And then you're like going, and then so after she reads it, she figures that stuff out, and I'm paraphrasing and totally giving my point of view from a fucking outsider. But then she comes up and she's like, oh, now I'm going to design each person to fit within the scene and the storyline. And her and I became friends. Like, we were texting earlier today because I just designed something in Japan that finished its final sampling stage. And it's this Boro wild shit that I did in Okayama. And the first one's on its way to me right before I fly to Japan, oddly enough. But I want to shoot it on something here before I go. And she's all ecstatic about shit like that. And that's kind of the prelude to us even having that conversation of her wanting to place that specific jacket on Kevin Costner. I've been real lucky that some famous people have, wanted, if have liked what I do. And it's been on people, for just their personal life, not in the, film or what have you. Jeanette contacted me and she's like going, I have a place for that jacket, but she saw that jacket similar to how I showed her the Boro shit that I just sent her this morning. And we bantered back and forth, and I designed that jacket. But I think it was between you and John, Nick, where I was fixated on a certain color, right? And it was this ivory colored pale horsehide, and I was fixated on it.
I remember, yeah.
So that's where it all started. I just wanted that fucking leather, and I wanted that leather for me. It didn't go beyond that. There wasn't, a design with the intention of it becoming this and it going on to that, or me thinking that the market was, gonna love this. I didn't think past the fact that I just wanted it. And originally I made the seat for the motorcycle in which we were building, like a 57 panhead. And I wanted, because everything's got this ivory white and this off-colored kind of direction, I wanted a leather for that seat. And then when I got the leather from you guys, that, it was a bit of a pull, right? Because that leather was, part of something, the backstory of the leather I want to keep kind of secret, because I want that to be only for me. Mm-hmm. So, but
Smart
so
man.
we got leather, and I'm like, going, fuck, and this is amazing. And then the seat went in motion, and simultaneous to that, I reached out, oddly enough, to you, Phil, and I was like going, I want to make patches for my corduroys that I'm designing right now and pushing through in Japan. And then you made the patches. So this full circle, and us talking about this is kind of neat, because this is part of the story in itself. And then I get the patches, and I make a seat, and I'm like going, oh man, I need a jacket. This really, its true place is this jacket. And I just altered that and kind of created the pattern for that Western kind of leather jacket that I wanted to make. And this leather was what I wanted to do it in. And that jacket that was just for me was made prior to me going back to Japan on that first trip, where they allowed people in the country after, that COVID bullshit that, took over the country, the world, and what have you.
Yep.
So I was in one of the first lots of people that were allowed into Japan, like visas, and you're entering to Japan through all the testing and different bullshit you had to go through. Lasted like 2.5 hours at the airport. Jeez. Just to be possibly let in and not put into quarantine. But I was wearing that jacket. Like, that jacket's just made. I'm excited. I love it. And I'm off to Japan for these tattoo things and all these meetings throughout Tokyo. And I'm wearing that jacket. And I share a picture with Janetta from Tokyo. And I'm like going, this jacket's fucking amazing. And she's like going, oh my God. And she's like going, I have when can we meet? And I go, I'm in Japan. I go, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. And she's like going, as soon as you're back, we need to meet. I've got a bunch of things I want to go over with you. And prior to me sending that, unrelated to me pitching it towards anything, towards it, a part or her or TV or anything, as soon as I got back, she wanted to meet. So we met like the next morning at 8 a.m. or something. And we went through this list of items that she was interested in from the collection that's available on the site. And then these other things that hadn't yet been released that she's seen pictures of. And that jacket was kind of the first and the focal point where she had, by reading the script and started placing out what she wanted, the cast to wear in certain scenes, that jacket was placed. Like, she's like, we got to have it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, the catch is it's made to order. The catch is there's one. It's like going, that leather is like, we're not even in a production environment. So we don't have that leather. It's like going, I think I have enough to make a couple jackets, but I need to check with the sewing room. And she's like going, well, we need to talk about that jacket. And we went through the rest of the parts and we came back to that jacket. And I was like going, okay, what I'll do is I'll send you my jacket. I go, but you can only have it for a couple weeks. And then I'll be on the mission to do what's necessary to get you the jackets made for what you need. Kevin Costner can at least try on my jacket. They can do all the preliminary things using just my jacket. And that ended up being like 2 of my jackets, both with Horween Leather, that went to this, stage within their process of they're just using my jacket. And that ended up being even what they modeled as they wore and tore and put that through the distressing stage for that jacket that ended up in the show.
Super cool, man.
That's cool.
I mean, I've never seen I barely get to see my products in the wild. Nick's brand is much larger than mine, and I barely see Horween Leather in the world.
Well, they're on people's feet, or they're in their pockets. I mean,
I feel like it's hard to see it in the wild. Sometimes. I mean, in Chicago, maybe that's a smaller market of that stuff.
Yeah.
But we were curious, Josh, how did you get to where you're at now with the brand? It seems like you have a very eclectic taste in things, from motorcycles to, all your clothing. But how did you get to where you're at?
How far do you want me to go back?
As far as you
got
want.
All day.
Wait, why don't you talk to us a little bit about like what you were doing before you even started Black Bear? Because it all informs everything else.
There's a bunch of pretty specific steps or things that kind of did their own, fork direction, where it's like going this direction, then hits the fork and then that direction, which I feel fortunate that I've had a couple of pretty significant ones, from growing up in Indiana in a large family, and being kind of moved as a family from Indiana to Washington when I was just before I turned 13. In that move, that wanderlust that I even may have had as a kid, but I grew up with a BB gun under my hand, a BMX bike, and I was left to my own demise. That was the best way for me to grow up, because it's like going, your entertainment or information came from encyclopedias, 2 TV stations at best, and an occasional, if you're lucky enough, you'd go to a fucking movie, right? And it's like going, the swimming pool, the public swimming pool in the summer, and then during the winter, it's like going, you played sports for school and you got into trouble because the nature and the outside was your babysitter, right? And it's like going, fucking wonderful way to grow up and to kind of spark this level of curiosity that's still with me today, right? My, lean to at that stage was sports. So all I did is play sports, because it was something I was better at than academics, which I was terrible at. And then I just lent into sports and ended up, through getting in a whole shit of trouble where I was kicked out of schools and what have you, and ended up in private school, but under scholarship to play football, and recruited by Notre Dame, but I was just a scrapper, right? I was not at the level of all these collegiate players that I was kind of aligned with. I was just mean and I was tough and I worked real hard. And it was my way out because academics certainly was not my way out. I'm a hardcore dyslexic. My schooling was fucking terrible. I mean, like academically and scholastically terrible, right? But sports was kind of my channel out. And because of those same antics, I got in shit ton of trouble. But it was I think we should all get in shit ton of trouble when we're young, because at least hopefully we can, get put in line for the fact that there's repercussions for doing the shit when the repercussions are kind of ceilinged, right? So many injuries because of my antics within sports. My scholarships were feeble, meaning I was a liability at best, right? I was not that big. I didn't have a whole lot of room for improvement. And I got injured a shit ton because of how I played in the sports I played. I left the country as a sophomore in college and ended up in the Micronesian Islands. And my favorite story of that is like, well, no, there's no internet. I applied for this job, and the only way I could go is by being paid. I applied for the job with a written letter, right? I got a hired position in the Micronesian Islands, and it was oriented around some wild, silly interest I had in like Cocktail the movie, right? Like going slinging drinks and, that was the dream. I want to go, have, rich old ladies and wear a Hawaiian shirt and pour drinks. And I left the country with a checkbook, which is looking back so fucking silly. I didn't have a credit card. I had a checkbook. I had $20 in my pocket, and I was dropped off at the airport with a pat on the shoulder, have fun by my parents. And that was my first adventure outside the country. And that changed me, in more ways than I can probably even identify. Let me finish college with a couple degrees, and then moving to the Caribbean and kind of following that same kind of affection towards that lifestyle, hospitality. I ran the beverage department for Weston, but I also found out quickly that I was more interested, or I was happier on one side of the bar. And that wasn't the side of the bar that was pouring the drinks. So it's like so I quickly said, okay, fuck, dude. All right. So let's go back to the US. And this was all before the internet existed, right? So then you're back in the US and economy shit. I worked and could only get my only job I could get is at Kenworth. And I was working in the assembly line, material planning, and then marketing within Kenworth semi-trucks in Seattle. And then quickly worked into a sales role as a young kid, because I was still only in my early 20s at this point, for international export of aftermarket related things for Kenworth and Peterbilt. Quickly moved from that after the ceiling was met into like the technology thing, because that was where I lived, Seattle. And that was such a non-fit. It's fucking hilarious. Because it's like it's such a non-fit. But I succeeded to some extent in that, and then hit the ceiling fairly quickly in a couple of years. And I was doing more marketing. And I had, at that point, spent almost all of my time doing what I liked, and that was action sports. And that started when I was young, but that led to the only way I could get that high and that thing that I needed in regards to adrenaline. I spent all my weekends in Whistler. I had a place where I stayed with my friends from Australia in Whistler at that stage.
What did a weekend in one of those weekends in Whistler look like?
I would leave my job at like 10 in the morning because I was good enough at that point at that job where I was off at 10 in the morning on Friday. And then I would show up at Whistler, and my friends were doormans at the bar, and we had a big house that I had this small like closet side room with, and I'd show up at the bar, and then my antics were, and that started going back to working in the beverage world and starting well before that, where I also fed my need for adrenaline and chaos by consuming at a high level. Like I consumed like Motley Crue level consumption.
Nice. And
I consumed that from the age of like 16, right? It's like when I was a bulldozer. In
Motley
so many
Crue is
aspects.
a heavy example.
Yeah. And that's where it's like and I'm sober now, so I can speak with, even a pretty solid reflection back at that. But it's like, no, I was a bulldozer and I was heavy. I was a heavy hitter. And I awkwardly found some way of surviving or existing simultaneous to doing that. And having, enough success to keep on going within a high level of consumption. I was still able, while consuming at that level, I was still on the mountain when the mountain opened, right? And my life so my pace didn't get dedicated to one aspect, right? It wasn't just dedicated, or just wasn't how I approached work or how I approached my personal life or how I approached, let's say, consuming all this shit. It's like, no, it was all heavy. Like, it was all fucking throttled full. Like, that's just how I was from a young kid. So I'd get there and I would just party as like it was spring break. I partied like it was spring break 4 or 5 days a week for 20 some years. Slowly got me to just completely move to Whistler. I said, fuck it. It was my first fuck it moment where I said, fuck it. And I was like I looked around, I'm like going, fuck this. I'm done. I'm out. I'm going to go do this thing that I want to do. And I'm going to go start a creative, business, or I don't even think I thought that far. It's like, I'm going to go do the creative work I want to do. And Whistler's the place. And the thought, I didn't think beyond kind of that level, luckily, because it probably would have kept me from doing it, right?
Yep.
I didn't find all the things that would tell me, no, that's fucking stupid, or that's silly, or you're going to fail miserably.
What year? Can I ask what year this was?
I mean, I know how old I was. I was 27.
Okay.
So what year that was?
It doesn't matter. I just didn't know if you knew.
I mean, I'm 48, so let's say it's 21 years ago. Okay. Was my first fuck it moment, right? So then I left, and I was like I have very little money. I knew some people. I'd already done some fun things in that environment, and that was all I needed at that stage in my life. And then I'm in Whistler and had some success. It's like, no, I was doing product photography for some brand. I was doing like creative, like media pieces and presentational, let's say, seeking of sponsorships for some pro athletes I knew. I was like doing some web work, but it's like, and I don't do any of those things, wildly enough. Like, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a photographer, I'm not a graphic designer, but I was doing almost all of those things. And eventually I was doing them for some pretty significant brands, wildly enough. Kind of put me in a mindset that goes back to the dyslexia and the other things. Like, I didn't think about it. I didn't think that I couldn't do it. And I didn't think that to do it, I need to do all these things.
Would you say that it's you're taking your own tastes and thinking things more of like a creative director type of role, as opposed to like the actual guy running the Illustrator program?
Yeah, I mean, that's where it becomes even more fun. It's like, I don't think it through like that. It's like I don't. It's like I didn't title myself. I didn't say this is what I'm seeking to do. I was like, no, I just want to do that. It's like I want to work with Armada Snow Skis. That's how my thing would start. Like, no, I want to work with them. And then I was like oh, fuck, this is what I can do. This is what I can do. This is what I can do. And I was like okay, let me find this person to do this. Let me find this person to do that. And then you end up creative directing, but not out of the intention of it, right? My intentions were very childish, and they still are today. It's like fucking childish. It's like I just want something, or I think it would be fun to do something, and that be the kind of driving force and the starting point.
I think if more people took that approach, or some version of that approach, that people would be a lot happier. I mean, you're finding out, you're like, this is what I want, and then let me figure out how to get it. Not like, I'm going to do this horrible job that I don't want to do so that I can have a chance at the thing I want. I mean, it's kind of backwards if you think about it.
And that's that dyslexia thing, which I always kind of lean back and that it's like I'm dyslexic to the fullest extent on even how I approach things. I stopped looking towards others and how they did something for how I should or how I will do something, right? And I lost that at a very young age. So I stopped doing that at a very young age, where I don't read directions. fucking terrible in many cases, right? It's like, no, I don't follow the sequence as an example of what someone else did as a sequence, right? I look at it and I'm like, how can I fucking do it? And not with saying, okay, let me watch a YouTube video. It's like, no, I know that won't work for me, so I don't bother. But I learned big lessons. Like I have fucking failures. It's like when I have colossal failures. Like before I turned 30, I lost everything I owned. There wasn't enough for me to go bankrupt. But then when you lose everything, it's like when you'd make that quick analysis, I'm like, fuck, all right, I'm fucking busted. I'm busted. And I fought it for a little while. And after a while, I'm like, oh, fuck. It's like I'll start again. And it wasn't even that I thought, it's like it was inherent. It's like I came back to Seattle driving a Cherokee. First stop was a Cadillac dealership in Seattle that I spoke to on the phone that said they would take my Cherokee from me, and that they had a DeVille that I convinced them to take as a trade-in, that meaning they took over my lease or the amount I owed on that Lincoln. And then that DeVille, like a 1986 DeVille, right? So it's like I show up and they're like, yeah, you can have this. Your first, because I still didn't have enough money to pay for it. It's like your first payment isn't due in 3 or 4 months, or 4 months it was. And it's like and that debt of the Cherokee was, loaded off to them. And I drove to my dad's house. Everything I owned was in the trunk of the Cadillac. And it's like my dad looked at me and said, I was like, can I borrow $5,000 to start again? He's like, no. He's like, you can stay here for 2 months, and I won't charge your rent. I was like, fucking take it. Done. Within 2 days, I'm off in LA and I'm doing some crackpot project for somebody at that point, action sport related. And then I'm back sleeping on the couch, waking up at 4 a.m, working with no job. Ended up in the bond industry. So I worked in the finance industry, overseeing an information network. From that kind of failure, or that losing of everything, and that kind of fighting my way back up, simultaneous to doing action sport, creative, and freelance work, ended up staying in that bond role as a contractor for like 5 years. And ended up building that business simultaneous to doing my own business that ended me up in, a product that I had created that was a graphic package distributed through dealerships for Mastercraft globally. And again, going back to, I don't know how to use Illustrator or Photoshop, and I was doing the graphic work for a rather large company. And I was doing it in owning the artwork, and was doing it amongst projects for Oakley and Red Bull and all these other things, simultaneous to doing something on the polar opposite of the spectrum within the bond, fixed income, and finding some unique, awkward success in both of them that helped each other kind of exist, right? And simultaneous consuming like Motley Crue, right? So it's like, yeah, it's like you look back like fucking, yeah, it's like, 1 week I'll be on the phone with Reuters. 2 days later, I'm jumping out of a plane in Panama with Travis Pastrana. Right?
I was just looking up what a 1986 DeVille looks like.
Ooh, was it this beautiful yellow tan?
Was it a 2-door or a 4-door?
It was a 4-door.
Do you have affection for that car? Because that is not the most beautiful car I've ever seen.
No, it's certainly not. It's like it's certainly not. It was what was. It's like it's what.
Oh yeah.
The situation allowed me.
Yeah,
it's
I just, it's funny because you think back to certain times and you have like a lot, you can identify something and you're attached to something, and because I know you have a love, or I think you have a love for mechanical things with cars and motorcycles. I don't see you going back and buying a 86 DeVille, but I could be wrong.
No, and that's to fast forward into. I love cars and I love motorcycles and I love all the things that go along with that. And I seem to they're all old, right? There's some story or feeling I get from these things that are old, it's where I always land. So my finding a little bit of success but also when you look back, it's like, well, not really. I found like a 66 Lincoln Continental because I was talking with my friend and we were talking about the cars we liked. I walked into my office and I looked on Craigslist at the time because that was really the only place that there was any way in which to barter old things online. And I found a 66 Lincoln Continental, and that was like 12 years ago, I think. Yeah, 15 years ago. And it was like this guy was selling it, and I jumped in my car and I drove and saw it. I looked at it, sight unseen, and I love mechanical things, let's say automobiles, but I can't fucking work on them. Like, I'm ass backwards. Like, my brain doesn't compute. I don't get stressed out at certain things, but I get stressed out in an environment where I've got to fix something. And I fix something that's mechanical that is, it's like I need it to be uncontrolled for me to feel comfortable. And mechanical is extremely controlled, right? It's very specific. There's even steps in the process that make it possible, right? You can't do one thing. You can't bounce around and do one thing and then do another thing. It's like, well, no, there's a sequence in which things need to be done. In that environment, I'm fucking terrible.
Like, don't let Josh work on your car, and don't send him Legos.
No, it's like when, and that's wonderful advice. And it's like but the analog things still have this. I have an affection towards that. But I went and got. I was like, and I offered the guy. I think I offered him $4,000. I was like, well, you take $4,000. And he's like, well, I'll ask the owner. And I don't think she'll take it because she was asking like 5.5. Right. I go back. And I get this phone call, and he's like, yeah, she'll take it. Because this guy was brokering this car that was a one-owner 66 Lincoln that was all original, right? And hadn't been driven in like 10 years. The woman was like 80-something. And she's like, yeah, she'll take $4,000. And I was like, holy shit. I didn't have $4,000, right? I just threw that number out because I thought it was fucking, it was a long shot. So then I had to find my way of, in my life to come up with that $4,000. And I did, and I show up and I just get in the lake, and it's like fucking unlicensed, fucking 30 miles away from where I live in my office, and blow fuel line, fucking cars, all, it's like when everything, it's like when, so I had a blow, no fuel line, 66 Lincoln, and I live in, an area where in Seattle's got the least desirable and the most desirable are right next to each other. And nothing's really undesirable in Seattle and all, or at least not at that time there wasn't. So it's like going, no, I was in the shit neighborhood, 66 Lincoln. It's like going, and then I had to, for the first time, figure out how one goes about, getting something that's old, fixed. And I fell in love with that. Like, I loved my Lincoln. I still love it. It's like going, my Lincoln became, accompanied by my old Defender, and then that came accompanied by my first bike with a 48 panhead, my second bike, which was a 37 flathead, my third bike, which was a 57 panhead. So it's like, no, I've got a problem, and I'm sure some people do. And I live in the middle of the city, so I've got this slew of shit, like a country boy in the center of the city.
I feel like listening to this story and the way that you describe yourself, it feels like your unconventional view of objects and not following instructions has resulted in a really beautiful range of product that you're currently offering on Black Bear, that it seems like an eclectic mix of things that I don't see elsewhere. And would you attribute this past to the result that you're getting right now?
No, it's just childish. It's like, it's, I just want it, right? So I may want something from whatever I'm experiencing or whatever I see, and or looking back at the past, and then that's the base point. It's simple. Like, it's like when I like a variety of things. Like, I've been fortunate to experience a variety of really exciting things, and pulled to places like Panama and Europe and Japan for all this, wild number of shit that I've thrown myself into over the last 25 years, where it's like going, and I'm fortunate that each one of those experiences have influenced me, right? It's added to my life. And I was able to acquire, certain feelings for certain visual fucking likes and dislikes, certain things that I wouldn't have been able to see or acquire at the depth that I was lucky enough to acquire if I didn't acquire it by how, by traveling or by physically being in the environment. It wasn't me looking on the internet. It's like it wasn't me, acquiring that experience by being taught. My first job within like clothing was when I was like 8. Like, so like or 7 or something. It's like when I folded clothes at a clothing store in Indiana. That was like a haberdashery type shit, but you're in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So put it in perspective, right? It's like you're not in New York. So it's like but I wore a tie and I thought it was fucking cool. Right. So it's like and it's like, and then you come up and you go into athletics and you're hitting a more like disruptive, against the grain type environment or direction. But I still had a love for fashion, and I had a love for probably a more refined fashion than is presented. So you've got all these conflicting things, which is really me. I mean, it's like, it's not one dimensional. It's not like I love athletics. It's like, I fucking don't like watching sports. I don't watch any sports. I have friends that are pro athletes. It's like, I've never seen them play. It's like it's not because I don't admire what they do. And it's like, I just don't watch sports. I'm not really interested. I mean, it's not what I do. And I think suiting and refined tailoring, I think it's fucking cool because it's fascinating, right? It's like I love, doing what I'm not supposed to do, like shell cordovan boots that I ride on my bike. It's like I didn't have to think that through. It's just what I wanted. I thought shell cordovan was fucking amazing, right? So it's like so I love this leather. And I didn't give a flying fuck if people thought it was odd that these boots that I created, should be in a traditional sense worn in a very refined, or applied to a pretty refined footwear, or, to things like you make, Phil. It's like no, it's expensive. It's beautiful. And I'm like, fuck, dude, I need a tall boot that's like an engineer boot. And I was like fuck. And then when I get a boot, it's like nah. It's like I'm going to wear it where I want to wear it. I still remember the kind of the funniness that I even saw in myself. It's like I'm crossing the pass in December, right? This weather is absolute shit. It's snowing, sleeting, and I'm on my 48 panhead, and I'm crossing the pass, right? And I'm wearing these brand new boots, that are these shell cordovan boots, and this horsehide N1 jacket I designed in Japan. And I don't even think past the fact that I love these boots. Fucking, these boots are cool. And I now look at those boots, and beyond the leather that's used and the craftsmanship that Wesco, put into making them, it's like, now that those boots have been through certain things with me, that is why I love them. Yep. It's not the fact that they're made of something that's, again, I'm sure that's one element of why I love them, is because it's made with all the things that I'm also affectionate towards, like the, shell cordovan leather. But like, I look at them and they make me smile. But it's all those things that kind of bring that smile. It's not just like, if they weren't worn, all I would want to see is what shit I could get them into. I just look at it like, fuck, dude, those don't look right. They're just pretty. I was like they'll be real pretty if they get, put through some shit.
Is there a particular like time or some people that because I think your aesthetic is pretty interesting and specific without being predictable. And I'm just wondering I know that you've got the 66 Lincoln and you've got the older Harleys. So, there's definitely a bit of a vibe there, but is there anything else that you particularly identify with that you think drives your inspiration? I think
that's that fun conflict, that it's like I have, like, I think the West is cool. I mean, I have the West even from a young kid, right? It's like the few shows that we're able to see were Western shows, right? The few movies that were kind of real relevant in that time era were Westerns, and whom I idolized within film, at least, was the Clint Eastwoods of the world. It's like on those, and growing up with that being kind of the freedom aspect and kind of the outlaw aspect in which, each one of these, the cowboy has to me, the bike has to me this level of freedom. I really like things that are like to do things that I'm not supposed to do, I guess. Still, it's like if I'm not supposed to do it, and I find the reason I'm not supposed to do it is silly, I lean into it. And that's kind of a general characteristic that comes from when I was young and still lives in me today. I think influences are largely travel. To me, I mean, brand influences, I still have an affection towards my memory of Car Work in Progress, but that's a long time ago too. And I'm not saying I'm not familiar with what they're doing today, but it's like when I grew up in that action sport conflict, and even that conflict while I was in high school and playing, with a heavy direction of going to college football. It's like no, I was the kid wearing Birkenstocks that was the captain of the football team, that smoked a lot of weed, that drank more than he should, while being the captain of the football team that was, let's say, dating a girl that was 4 years older than him. So it's like none of it made sense even then. You look back at it, it's like, oh no, it didn't make any sense. I didn't fit in, really. So all my influences came and kind of got just mashed together. It's like when I like the West, but then I'd love suits, right? And I'd be the guy that you wouldn't expect to want to wear a suit. I loved, the islands, and I loved Hawaiian shirts, right? So you have this affection, but then you look deeper into the Hawaiian shirt aspect of it and the flowers and the stories and all these other things. But I was physically in the islands, right? So it's like that's where I fell in love with those things, and my affection towards the West. It's like, and I only got to start to satisfy that the older I got, where I start to be able to, have an interaction or have a connection with somebody that's in that shit, right? That's really in it. And then you're able to, still, I'm only an observer, right? It's like I'm not a participant like at rodeos or anything. It's like I'm not a cowboy, and it's like going by any stretch of the imagination. But I've been able to at least, rub shoulders with folks that is their world. And then you're like, that enabled me to fall deeper in affection towards, how cool I think it is. But Car Work in Progress was doing some of the neatest shit 20 years ago when it wasn't even allowed in the US, where the only way you get your hands on it is through like Hong Kong, right? Because it was all, license limited to even enter the US. And they were doing stuff that was so innovative, pre-Supreme, taking on, a more fashion direction within even that brand. And I was always, I worked with Nike, and I worked with Nike SB, and I worked with some of these brands, again, decades ago, which is funny looking back and realizing how old I am or how long I've been in one way or another related to, involved in the shit. That street wear back to the Stussy and the early years of Supreme and the brand of Fucked by Burnett, like all those things. It's like those don't leave you when they're impacting you at an early and young age. And I know I'm older than you guys, but it's like when the action sport kind of, as now a whole category, was kind of born during, an age in which I was in it, right? And I got to, in some way or another, be involved in that, but involved in that in the creative aspect and involved in that. That's the catch. Even then, I was like, no, I was completely an outsider. My job and projects I did with like Black Box Distribution and Zero, 25 years ago or 22 years ago, it's like I was an outsider completely, but I got accepted to some extent and was able to do like small projects. And I just thought it was cool, and what they were doing is neat, and it was still youthful at that age. And 2 weeks later, I'm working with Armada, and doing like, again, unrelated. The projects and work I did with Armada at that stage, at a very young part of their business, was very different than what I did with Mastercraft and very different than what I did with, Zero. It's like each one of those things were so independent from each other. There are probably some lines in which you could draw between the two, but largely independent.
I feel like you've lived many professional lives in your life already, and
well, it's like, I think that's what it comes. It's like when I don't feel so, right? Because it all makes sense to me. But it's like and that's what enabled me to, I guess, go into a really roundabout fucking way of answering what you said. It's like all those things have influenced me, because that's largely what was behind all these things. So I was just chasing something.
Dude, what was the thing you were chasing?
To smile. I mean,
just joy, right?
Like, no, I just wanted to feel. It's like I wanted to do cool shit. I wanted to try to do the things I thought were neat and interesting and cool. And I didn't bother thinking a whole lot about me being able to or not. It took me a while to learn to shut the fuck up, because I still don't do that as well as I should today. But those moments of just listening, certainly put me in a position where I could, then in return do shit. Each one of the action sport things, which is such a fun memory, is that, to be around some of these companies and brands before what we know. I mean, the way that we know them today with, social media, the normalcy of action sports, they are in today's, I think in today, an action sport professional athlete is the same as a collegiate or a team sport professional athlete, right? They've now been adapted into the Olympics. They train at an equivalent level. They're paid at a similar level in many cases. They're able to go into different things that are outside that business and develop businesses. So the gap between those two worlds is less than it was back in the original days, right? Where these guys were scrappers. These guys were outside the shit, right? They were doing shit that they weren't supposed to do. They were largely unaccepted. I love that, right? That was one of the really fun parts of that world. It's like when you're a bit in a fight, right? You're in a fight of acceptance. You're a fight against the man. It's like when I cherish that I was able to be a part of that, because that part is something I hang on to today, and it's still part of because I'm independent. I'm not. Even as you guys said, I don't really make sense to everybody, right? It's like I'm not easily defined for not intentional reasons. It's the way I am, I guess. It's like I do things that don't make sense. It's like but I like it. Right?
I really appreciate it. If I'm honest, I think it's great. Like I said, the result of the products that you're making in your brand, it creates such a unique perspective of the things that you're creating. I think it's great. And actually, I was wondering too. We were talking about the lineage to get to where we're at now, but what was the first product that you did for Black Bear brand?
This shirt.
The one you're wearing, yeah.
Yeah. That's the first one. It's like I had to figure out everything. So I didn't walk in there. It's like I didn't walk and start this with anything other than it's like I was helping another person take on and try to, it was defunct labels, and it was more within streetwear. And I was doing this in kind of my bridge to get out of some of the things I was doing within graphic world and Mastercraft and owning products that I created. I was trying to get out of that. I was consumed by something in that stage, by something that I was just trying to prove that it was possible to do. And in that proving that it was possible to do, I created and designed this distribution of this graphic product that was sold, and the development and creative direction of this graphic product. I ended up owning it. I didn't want to from the very beginning. It's like I'm not a graphic artist. I'm not into, let's say, the industry or the product. I mean, I like boats, but it wasn't something. It's like but I had to create it to show them that it was possible, because they didn't think it was possible. And so then at the end of it, 8 years later or 6 years later, I owned it. And we'd been successful in distributing it throughout the world, and licenses were I own licenses, and I'm like, well, fuck, dude, I don't want to do this. It's like when it's like when I wanted to do fashion, and I was helping, among a variety of other projects within the fashion world, also very bridge to action sports. But then I was like, fuck, as I was helping this other person and identifying some of these defunct brands, and that past experience helped me acquire some intellectual property experience, and the people in which I worked with could do, trademark law and what have you, because I had to be somewhat protected because of the big names I was dealing with and some of the contracts I ended up owning, or licenses I ended up owning in that stage. It's like when I just had to have some familiarity. But I still did it such, like, I call it a cowboy, but I just like going, no, it was unconventional. I was doing it out of a small studio, a couple interns, and I was like a scrapper, right? And I was like doing shit I wasn't supposed to do, cleaning up agency work, and we owned a couple products, and it was all while I was consuming again at that level. I was like, going, fuck, it was wild, right? It's like going, I was a bulldozer, right? And that allowed me to get in and do a lot of things, but also had those limitations. On a Tuesday 9 years ago, I stopped drinking, stopped consuming everything. Tuesday morning, right? That was it. And that kind of, switch, that there was a variety of reasons why I did it. None of them legally, actually, but it was a variety of reasons why I wasn't, in legal problems at that point. I hadn't lost everything, although I'm sure it was in the near future. I just stopped, right? Diving into your own like psyche and sitting there and figuring out all this other bullshit that you've kind of pounded into you over 25 years of consuming heavy, and you're just like going, you're dealing with it all, right? And dealing with it all by myself too. It's not like, and then I'm like going, okay, that sent me down that motion of helping search out these defunct brands, and then finding and seeing dysfunction a little bit easier because I was clear, and saying, I don't want to deal with those guys that are going in that direction. But I found this Black Bear brand. I was familiar with it because of a number of my interests, but I wanted it. And it goes back to that same thing. I just wanted it, right? I wanted to be the creative director for this brand. And I went down kind of a process where it was like going, I was just trying to find who owned it, right? And I had some legal help with saying, just help me find a name. Help me find a family member. Help me find somebody that owns it. Because I envision making my own version of all these things that I like in this. People had failed going after that mark, and then that intrigued me even more. And the amount of information you could get about this brand was so difficult, right? There wasn't a lot of documentation. There wasn't a lot of, the internet. You needed to go well beyond the internet, because the internet was not there. It was so old and prior to the internet, and had been so much time between, the internet coming to life and the death of the brand, or the shutter of the brand, that just very little was available. And how it shuttered, 20 years after it really stopped doing what everyone that is a fan of vintage stuff was doing, right? So there's even a larger window of when it was actually operating and making the cool shit. But there's like ghost signs in Seattle, and there's ghost signs, and then there's these vintage pieces, if you're fortunate, you can get your hands on. Some of the vintage pieces, as you go deeper, are just fucking rad, right? There's denim history that's so deep within Black Bear brand, but it was never as large, or there wasn't as much of the denim for Black Bear brand, or any Black Bear product, as there was the Carhartts for workwear, or let's say the Filson, which was, outside of here, or, the Levi's, of course, the Wranglers and the Lees and what have you. It was just a micro of those. So it's even more rare, right? And that's even a past that was separated between now and then that's even longer. So that just got me more interested. I wanted it more. And then I went after that mark with, a friend that just said, why don't you just go do your own brand? Since you've done all this other bullshit for so long, why don't you do it? And I was like, and I, sober, clear mind, and had dropped a bunch of, the things that, would be obstacles. Although look back, I had very little things that were put up obstacles in front of me. And I did a lot of things I didn't know how to do. So that one person saying it that once, it's like, well, that was it. And then I just said, fuck it. All right. I'm going to do it. And then I just I can do t-shirts. That's fucking easy. And it's like going, and then developing the brand and obtaining the mark was all happening simultaneous. I didn't do one or the other like one would advise anybody to do. It's like, oh no, I just went all in. Fuck it. All in. Developed a website, through this mix mash of resources that I had and these people that I knew, print some t-shirts. I go, then let me go down and see what item, what's next, and no harm in, I didn't think before I'd call somebody. Like I called your dad. He was one of the people within the first year that I called, and I just thought the leather was cool, heard a little bit about it. It's still a long time ago now, and I'm like going, call him up, and I ended up with him. I mean, who would have fucking figured, right? I ended up with him on the phone.
I bet that was a long conversation too, knowing him and knowing you. I bet it wasn't like a 5-minute conversation. Is what I'm saying. I bet it was a lengthy exchange.
It was, but that that lucky moment. It's like going. That's like when we got on the phone, both long talkers, I guess, right? And both have like this variety of, interest. I think we spoke about skiing a great deal. I know that. We talked about boats. It's like, we didn't talk about shit in regards to what the intended call was. And that seems to be my scenario too. It's that like, we just talked about fucking whatever. And there was that enabled us to have an interest in each other and an interest in what each other was doing. Right.
Yeah, it's important.
I hadn't made anything with leather. I didn't know shit. I called up with not knowing shit.
What did you want to make when you made that call, the out of leather?
See, now you're thinking like you do. Phil.
Oh, you're just like, I like your leather. What's up?
I was like going, fuck, I don't know what I want to make, but I want to make something. Right?
Nice.
It's like, I want to make something. Right? And I don't know enough to think I know what I'm going to make. So it's a neat kind of childish, and I love to use that. It's just childish. It's simple-minded. It's like, very goal objective, but the goal was just to feed curiosity. And it's like going, I was lucky enough to be curious, and I'm lucky enough to follow that curiosity. That's it. And then that curiosity is alive, so it just takes on a life of its own. And that was happening simultaneous in a bunch of different directions. And it's happened most of my life in the same way, where it's like a shotgun. It's like going, I'm not good at concentrating on one thing. Terrible at it. It's like my fucking nightmare. Like me tightening the bolts on my panhead, it's like, no, I'll have anxiety.
Jeez.
Fucking weird.
Yeah.
I get anxiety tightening the bolts on that bike. But I don't get anxiety next to a semi-truck when I'm in a hailstorm on a front brakeless chopper on the freeway. I don't.
Huh.
That doesn't make me anxious, but it certainly makes me anxious to tighten bolts or to do something that's got the system steps, very narrow. It's like, no, it's like I need to have chaos. Not that I'm not seeking for that chaos to subside. The entire time I'm in the chaos, I'm seeking serenity or calmness. But I seem to find a calmness or a quietness in the chaos.
I think that's really awesome.
Yeah. What I wanted to go back just for a second because you mentioned Boro before. So, because I think that's a really super interesting material. I don't know
what that is.
It's like a patchwork indigo fabric that's like a traditional Japanese thing, and the idea is like you end up with this you start out with a piece of fabric that you use, and then as you get a hole in it, then you patch it with another piece of fabric, and then you end up with like this patchwork, like indigo thing. Is that accurate, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm still learning a lot about it. I've started the process because of I became really interested in it, and these past 2 trips to Japan. I'm back in Japan in 3 weeks, but I that's one of the kind of tasks or things that I was kind of poking at and trying to uncover and explore was how I could do my own Boro item. That patchwork, and again, I think it's patchwork, and it's these fabrics, and how you described it is accurate to my understanding. And part of it's like when sometimes Boro is largely denim based, right? So it would start out with denim and denim fabrics, and then indigos are kind of all in that kind of world. And then, some, brands have done really neat things, like Capital is really, what Capital does is really neat, and that's probably the most mainstream, something that you could even find in the US that would be doing a Boro item. It's just all real bespoke in the sense that you can't mass produce it, right? It's still, everything's going to, if not be completely one of a kind, it's going to be largely one of a kind, because that's the result, or that's the result of patchworking something,
That's
right?
the nature of it. Yeah. If you try to mass produce it, then you've gone against, then it's not real anymore, because you've sort of had to fake it. And I was interested when you mentioned that, because I was kind of thinking like, oh, well, it's Black Bear is like kind of the only kind of approach that you could have. Like you can't make 100 Boro jackets. You can make 10 maybe, or 25, because you've got someone like you that's going to look at each one, and you're going to make each one individually, because you like you said, you can't mass produce it. Otherwise it's just fake at that point.
Yeah. And part of it's like, and then you get down to things like, how can I make 100? Right. And you're like, and you do that type of shit. It's like, maybe I can. It's like, how does that work? And then it's like and then how does that work? It's like I'm fortunate enough to be in Okayama, right? I'm fortunate enough to be, this upcoming trip, similar to last trip. It's like I'll be in the mill that makes the denim that I use. It's like and I'll be in the rope dyeing factory that makes the yarn that then ends up in the mill, right? And I'm there, and enough of these people, it's like no, I'm that kind of, can I do it? Right? Can I only make 10? All right, that's cool. It's like but can I make 100? Right? And it's like or it's like can you make 100? But it's like can you, the only way I can make 100 is if the consumer knows that what they get is what they get, right? It's that's the nature of the item. It's like they'll all be similar, but they're all going to be different, right? If you're, especially because the real neat Boro items, have, it's not all clean patchwork, right? It's not like I'm going and, cutting up, certain fabrics, and then it's like, no, it doesn't have what I love about Boro, or what my impression of Boro is, if you do it in that way anyhow. It's like and then it's like but what fun fabrics can you use, right? And then why don't you do it like all regional, where I'm just going to keep it as all the fabrics that we use on this item are all going to be from Okayama. They're all going to be from, this mill and this mill, right? And then we're going to make it from beginning to end in Okayama, which I'm lucky. It's like I now have found, or been exposed to, or have these interactions and these relationships that can allow me to do that. Yeah, I'll be in Okayama with, people from IWC, right? Because they're going to follow me into the mill, and they're going to follow me into this rope dyeing facility. So, and they're doing it for something outside of that purpose. But all these things come, it's like they're all the same to me. I would do it for fun on my own, with it being unrelated to anything regards to business. But
that's why you're doing it in the first place. We talked about that.
Yeah, and I don't think, but it's like there's just no separation. It's like on my business and what I do, it's like when I inherently think of business when I'm doing everything, right? But everything I do, including business, is something that I want to do.
You're just seeking the smiles.
It's at the base of it. That's it, right? It's like and I know that sometimes I have to fight these other things around it so I can get that smile. And I'm okay with it.
You know, what's really interesting is having worked a little bit with you on the patches for your products. What I loved about it, and I would imagine this translates to everything that you do, is you sort of told me, hey, just make it look like the way it does. We want it rough. It's almost like you want everything to be unique and its own thing, not uniform every time. And when I look at your website, that's what I see your products is like. Everything is completely you, right? It's very unique to Black Bear brand.
And isn't that the fun thing about Horween? And John and Nick and even Skip have said this in their own way throughout the last few years. It's like going, no, that is Horween Leather, right? Horween Leather, celebrates, and it doesn't over process the leather, so it becomes something the leather isn't, right? Leather is coming from something that was alive and has its inconsistencies and has its uniqueness. And that's one of the neatest things about leather, in my opinion. It's like when that leather is unique to that animal, right? And it's unique to how you guys tan that leather and tan that hide. And all those things do come through in that leather. And that's fucking great, right? And why not embrace it? And then start embracing all those things that are like that in life. It's like going, I don't want to be, and I don't find, like, the reason I have a 66 Lincoln that's, emerald green, it's like, well, no, it's the color it was when I got it. I like it, right? It's like when I want my car to be exactly what it is. I don't want to change it. I love the uniqueness of something that's old in many cases because it is an individual as a result of all the time it's been around, right? All the shit it's been through between the time it was originally made and today.
Yeah, I mean, people sometimes get hung up with leather on there's a healed scratch here, there's a flaw, or there's this thing, and like, oh, that's on my shoe, and I want it to be perfect. Well, it's like, that's kind of what makes the product that you have that you're holding right in your hand yours. I mean, there's nothing else like that anywhere. And there won't ever be. I mean,
especially those boots that rode through the pass in the terrible weather, right?
Yeah, well, but even like going back, they were already individual when you first put them on your feet, and then just the daily wear, and ride them through the pass. I mean, that just takes it even further.
The word that keeps coming to my mind about this conversation is authenticity. Like, there's certain things like vintage cars. You can't fake that. If there's something that is unique about that specific object, in the same way that every piece of leather is unique. And I feel like the way that the world has become, and I'm not old enough to know what it was like before, but it just seems like everything is very homogenized now and very same. And that's why I admire your brand so much, Josh, is everything is so the opposite of that. And I think it's from the story you told us of your childhood whims, just making yourself smile.
And you think about it, like,
can I jump in for 1 second? Sorry, Josh, I actually have to run right now, but you guys should keep going. I have to go pick up my son from school. But,
yeah.
No sweat. And again, it's like when we go back to the fact that, me and your dad, it's like when, if we start talking,
no, you guys should honestly keep going.
We could try to wrap it up too, because I got to bail also. But you have to go. Like, Nick has to go. Like, now.
I wanted to stay talking as long as I possibly could. But
all right,
I'm gonna run. You guys.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. You guys wrap up, and Phil, I'll talk to you later.
All right, see you, Nick. And
Thanks,
this is
guys.
a good chance for Nick, because usually at the end of the show we'll do favorites, where Nick will talk about, and we'll all
I don't
mention
have one.
things.
I never have one.
Yeah, this is his escape for today's favorites. You can take your headphones too, Nick. But what's that? I'll hold on to him. Yeah. So Josh.
Thanks, Josh. See ya.
Bye, Nick.
Hey, man.
Say hi to who are you picking up? Sam? Yeah. Say hi to Sam for us. I want to know, Josh, what was I know I've been seeing your boots. I believe it's from Wesco. I've been seeing some stuff on social media getting posts about those boots, and I was curious, are the footwear your most popular items that you're doing right now? What's most popular?
It's kind of neat because there doesn't appear to be like a category. If you mean boots or jackets or denim or something like that. It's fairly, ever changing like everything else, which is neat. That makes me happy because,
Right.
there's always something there's always something in the process or in one stage in the many stages of the process at all times. There's always something being designed. There's always something in regards to a development or a production, and it's seamless. Like it is always happening. That's what enables it's a way in which I feed my creativity or feed what I'm interested in, but also it just happens to be the sequence. Like when I'm always outputting something in regards to a design or an idea, and then they're always output, which there's always that interest. Like when something's always finishing, and it's finishing in sample, it's finishing in production, which allows me to release something all the time, which is fun for me.
Yeah.
Right. It's like going, and as soon as it starts to quiet, then it's like going, then it's design crazy. It's like going, no, then the shotgun begins again. I don't even know what your question was though. So sorry. But
well, I wanted to know what was popular, but it sounds like everything's like roughly same.
Yeah, I think it's neat because you see the responsiveness of certain things that may be, fairly off in consistency to anything else. Like I got some wild shit that's coming around the corner, right?
Well, that's my next question.
some of that stuff, I think it's already pre-digested because there's a couple people that get to see stuff prior, straight from sampling, right? It's like I'm in a dye house in Japan and I'm coming up with this wild old money green, right? And I'm instantly applying that to corduroy, and then that starts the process, and then you have to make the corduroy. So now it's like some of the processes are long in the sense that I will sample and develop something as narrow as the fabric, right? From concept to, the ability to produce an item with it. And then it has to be made in a volume that can produce a product. Right. And then, so you've got like that process now, because not everything's that in depth, but let's say a Boro item also, may take me before I can even release it. That could take me 7 or 8 months, which is fast, right? And it's like going, I have things that are much faster, and it's because I've got no restriction in regards to wholesale. I've got no restriction in regards to I need to get the marketing team up to speed. It's like going, fuck, I do it. So it's like going, the marketing is just the story that is a result of me doing what I do. Mm-hmm. There's no pre-planned marketing. There's no, there's no fabrication of a story. The story is what it is. I'm lucky that I ride a bike as much as I do. I'm lucky that my car is something that I have fun doing. I'm lucky that when I'm able to, and the moments break where I can, is travel, right? It's like when I have friends that are photographers. I don't, as soon as something can be made, I'm sampling it, making it, and wearing it. So it's not as if those things, so I have to place it on somebody. It's like, oh no, it's like I generally only have one. It's like one, I've made it for me, so I'm wearing it, right? So it's like when the content isn't with an intention of, propping me up. It's like going, no, there's generally only one, and I'm the one that's wearing it. It's made for me. It's in my size. And it's like going, and I'm breaking it in. I'm testing it as I'm doing all these things. So it's all happening simultaneous. But what I guess that answered that question was like, going, it's sometimes there's things that instantly get digested and instantly get kind of grabbed onto, that surprise me. Others, you'll see, a longer cycle of being available or exposed before they get, adopted by, let's say a consumer, and then it will get exhausted fast, right? It just happens like a waterfall or and then you're like going, and it's so fun because it's so unpredictable, and that's fucking life, right? It's like going, I don't pretend to know any of this shit because I don't, and it's like going, it's all happening. It's like going, I don't know shit. Like I'm learning something every day. It's like going, my experience is like, yeah. One thing I know is I don't know shit. Like, and I don't try to assume that I have a thumb on the market because I don't even think about it. I don't.
That's sort of like what I was just curious to ask about, but I guess that's part of why Black Bear brand is working, is there's no agenda, right? There's no specific thing, like a guideline or a roadmap that you're trying to like plot your course on. You're just going and getting inspiration around the world and making the product that you puts a smile on your face, which I love that notion. Like, what's going to make me smile today, or chasing the smile. I think it's really cool.
And yeah, I mean, we always feel good when we smile, right? It's like when is the moment in which we feel the best? Generally, amongst us smiling.
I mean, I feel like I bring this up in most episodes we do, but there's something about the word joy and like just chasing joy. And like, what am I going to do? What am I going to sacrifice to get joy? It seems to always keep coming up. So I admire that and I appreciate it about you. Can you give me a sense though? I mean, who do you feel like the brand is for other than yourself? Is it a specific type of person that you're trying to make things for?
Well, I'm really not. It's like and that comes down to, it's like maybe it's a big mistake, right? Maybe I should be, doing, whatever case studies and
right.
trying to understand what the market's trends are and what's next in regards to the market will be, interested in. It's like I think it's dishonest. To be honest, it's like these people that think they know shit, they don't know more than you or I. So if I started to assume that I knew what the market wanted, I'd be full of shit. I don't. And I think it's disingenuous to do personally, only because it's like fuck, dude, I like reality. It's like I want to change reality in the sense that I want reality to be chaotic, reality to be beautiful, reality to have all these things that stimulate me and make me excited, all these things. But it's like I want those things to exist in reality. So me being, honest with myself, which is one of those steps of, let's say, for me, venturing towards a state of sobriety. It's like I was fucking honest with myself, and that was the one simple thing that enabled me to kind of get some of my things kind of lined up. It was like I was brutally honest with myself, and to this day, I that's my objective. It's I don't give myself a pass. Fuck that. It's like I can't. I seek to be, honest. I don't seek to be nice. It's not my goal. I'm generally happier when I'm nice. So selfishly, I'm nice. I love saying that out loud too. It's like selfishly, I'm nice, but I can easily not be nice, and I don't have a problem with it when the situation merits it. But that's also how I treat myself. I'm not nice to myself if I shouldn't be. I'm fucking honest with myself. And I think being honest with myself, it's like I don't know shit, right? It's like I only know what I've experienced. I seek to experience more, and I seek to know more as a result of experiencing more. But I'm not under the impression that I know everything, because I fucking don't. I don't know shit. And I don't think any of us know shit.
I've been criticized for something that I do that is similar to how you approach things. And it's actually Nick's dad. When I was working for them, he told me I had a ready, fire, aim approach, which is obviously backwards, like you've been talking about, you feel yourself doing. But I also feel like there's something to be said for just jumping in the deep end. And I just actually feel encouraged talking to you about it, because it's making me feel a little bit validated. But thanks for... We're going to end with one more segment here, but I really appreciate you spending some time with Nick and myself today. And I also have a few of your products that I also really enjoy. I've said to some other brands that we've had on the show that the items of those types that I have from them are my favorite things. I have one of your t-shirts that you actually made for Nick and the Tannery folk that they gave to me. And I have one of your, it's like a coarse sort of like wool jacket thing. It's like a lightweight jacket. I don't know what it's called, but I think Nick gave that to me as like a gift.
I think it would be the Harris tweed, probably, or the original one, unless it's a solid color.
No, it's a tweed. It's a tweed.
Yeah, so it's Harris tweed. So that's one of my fixations that started years ago. And to this day, it's like when I've got this love affair and affection towards Harris tweed and all the wildness. Because like I have like samples and swatches from the different, say finishing rooms in Harris, Scotland, that I kind of explore. And the Harris tweed that I launch every year is like, well, no, it's made for me in Scotland. I get
so
them
awesome.
to make, right? It's like when, and I get to do wild colors, and I don't have, it's like when Harris tweed's cool. I mean, to do these wild plaids and the textures and the depth of colors, there's nothing like it, right? You just can't, there's no place in the world that has anything equivalent to it. So yeah, Harris tweed's rad.
Yeah. So my favorite stuff, man. I appreciate you very much. So we usually end the show with something we call favorites, and it's just a part where we can talk about like a little non-work thing. Maybe give myself another piece of media or something that you're into that I can check out. But most times it's like TV shows or movies or books or whatever. Is there something that you're into these days? It could be clothing. And
that's fucking tough, man.
You watch any TV shows? It's something I've also noticed about a lot of creative people that we talked to on the shows. Like people are like, I don't have time for that.
It's like when I have my kind of decompression time, I think entertainment like TV's fun. It seems, I mean, I like gangster shit. Like Mayor of Kingstown, like a year ago, that's cool. Like Mayor of Kingstown.
I haven't seen that. I can check it out.
Paramount. I think that's a pretty neat series that, well, and then I mean, not to pitch something that is back at, it's like I think Taylor Sheridan's pretty impressive, and what he does is pretty fucking neat. So I think 1823 is cool, especially as they kind of toggle between Africa and, Montana, or 1923. That's right. Sorry. The 1923, like the one that's, pre-post World Wars.
I haven't checked it out.
Kind of prelim to Yellowstone, I think. That one's cool. So I like the miniseries, like some of the Netflix ones, some of the HBO and Showtime ones, and then Paramount's coming to play, I think, too. Like, especially with kind of this, Mayor of Kingstown's also Taylor Sheridan. I mean, the fucking guy. Talk about somebody that you can't, with honesty, any naysayer to that motherfucker is off, because the guy is charging. Like the creative, the creativity that comes out of that guy is fucking wild, right? To bounce among all these shows, and just the amount of energy and exhaustion of limited time that he must, the pace and the intensity that he must go at, and the output of some of the funnest movies that are the most fun to me, and that's Sicario and, Wind River, and then you've got, again, Yellowstone, which is its own kind of personal shtick that I've got an interest in, and I think it's fun, to like Mayor of Kingstown, which is, very different. Like Mayor of Kingstown is like, I don't know, 90s in Detroit.
You said that's on Paramount?
Yeah, it's like Paramount, like that's, I think Paramount as like a streaming, it's in their streaming aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotta check it out.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I like all that shit. I don't consume a lot of it during the day, or I don't consume it at all during the day. Like a TV doesn't go on around me until at night.
Yep.
I don't think it's a positive thing for me in my life, because it doesn't. Yeah, that's what goes back to that Indiana shit. It's like when I've put so much cred or value back on the time in which, I didn't have, I wasn't bombarded with stimulants, creative stimulants. It's like when I couldn't, say I was interested in Hawaii, and then click, get bombarded with, what someone else captured in Hawaii. And then now that's my impression. My impression of Hawaii was all curious. right?
Mhm.
So I had to use, you know, my curiosity and my imagination to figure out what that was. And the only way I could satisfy or really figure that out was to physically go there. And I still hang on to that, the value of that today. It's like going, no, it's like going, consuming, you know, through the internet or through movies or through whatever medium, you know, a lot of information on a topic or a place or a subject, and not, you know, I think shutting that down quickly and then going into it and diving into it and physically being there, or physically, you know, touching it, or physically, you know, participating at whatever level you can, is so important for me, at least. It's like fun. So I try not to fucking, you know, watch a bunch of TV where it's like I'd rather
Just go there.
and I think, you know, fuck, dude, like, you know, go outside, right?
Yep.
It's like go do something.
Yeah, you got me depressed because I'm looking across the room at my Peloton instead of going and riding a bike outside. But in the winter
Well, it's
here,
like,
you know.
participate, don't be a spectator. It's like it's easy to be a spectator, right? And then you've got some false perception of your involvement, or your false perception of like what your experience was. Because if your experience is exclusively as an observer, that's bullshit, dude. That means you don't have any experience. It's like you're watching it, dude. You're not experiencing shit.
I get you. Well, I'm going to give you my favorite, which is first time I'm going to do one that I'm kind of bummed out about. But it's my understanding that yesterday we lost a legendary guitar player in the world. His name was Jeff Beck. And any guitar player, regardless of age, is probably familiar with Jeff Beck. But I just found it to be pretty sad to think about the notion of not being able to experience that in person. Like you're saying, even seeing like a performance of like if you're talking about skiing, there's something about seeing that in person as opposed to watching it on X Games or whatever. And it's the same thing with music. Like you're never going to be able to experience this legendary person ever again. So we have a really big loss to the world as of yesterday, losing Jeff Beck, an incredible guitar player with just, I think the biggest thing to say about him as far as his talent was all of the sound that you heard was very much a physical, it was a physical thing that had happened. All the sound was in his hands, and he didn't play with a guitar pick. He would play with his fingers. So you were really getting a unique, it's like he embodied the guitar. He was part of that instrument. And so that's my sad favorite of the day is Jeff Beck. But Josh, thank you for coming to spend some time with us.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to shoot the shit. And
where can people find you? Where do you like to hang out? Do you do any social media?
Yeah, I mean, like Black Bear Brand. So anything that says Black Bear Brand on it, it's Instagram or YouTube.
You do a YouTube channel?
Yeah,
nice.
That's all motorcycle stuff for the most part, and like stuff that, you know, we captured around the world. And you can follow my trip from like Washington to Texas, and Washington and with cowboys and flying helicopters in Colorado and all this other bullshit.
Wow.
Like, so it's all those kind of adventure stories were starting in COVID were kind of captured. So that's a fun place. And those same things are of course on the website, and you got to dig a little deeper into the journal and the different pages within it. But those videos are also there. So.
All right. I got to check it out. I haven't seen that. Well, thanks so much, Josh.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. And tell Nick I said hey, and you guys, thanks for all the contribution and help you give me, man.
Oh, yeah, dude. I mean, it's a pleasure.